everybody. It is Dean Z, and I am here in Jeffries Hall at the University of Michigan Law School, and I want to talk to you today about when to write an addendum, what to say in the addendum, how to go about thinking about this process, because I've gotten a lot of questions lately about it, and at the end of talking about it generally, I'm going to do a lightning round of these questions that we got. So let's get started. All right, so also to define our terms, I am not going to be talking today about the kind of addendum you file when you are having to declare misconduct. Law school applications all ask about whether you have any criminal sanctions or academic sanctions from a higher education institution, and they may ask some other questions. And for all of those, if you answer affirmatively, you have to file information about that. I'm not going to be talking about those in particular today, although I think a lot of what I'm going to say could give you some guidance if you have to file one of those. But I want to talk about a different kind of addendum, which is one that you would file or include with your application materials in order to explain something that is otherwise not obvious from your materials. So examples might be if you have a gap in employment or are applying at a time when you are unemployed. And so that might raise some questions, so you might want to address that. Or if you have, just 4 years of undergrad where your grades were weaker than you feel that they should have been because of some external factor that does not appear in your application or that may not appear clearly in your application, etc. So things that you need to explain that if you don't explain them, no one's going to know it, and they may draw the incorrect conclusions about your materials. So first you have to, when does one necessary? So you have to step back and first look at your application as if you are a third party and say, is there anything in here that might be confusing or unclear or ambiguous? And so that requires trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes when you're looking at your materials. Once you've done that, if you have identified something, then you have to ask yourself, is it important, right? So let's say you withdrew from one class. You have otherwise a completely normal looking academic record, but you withdrew from a class because it was boring, or it wasn't your vibe. Or let's say you got one bad grade. You have, lovely grades, and then you have one C- in one class. I wouldn't bother explaining one little thing like that. That's unlikely to have any impact on your application. The rest of it speaks for itself. And you don't want to, the downside of filing an explanation is it sounds like you're making, it can sound like you are making excuses. We're going to talk about how to not sound like that too. But you want to make sure you're not explaining things that don't need to be explained, because that creates surprisingly, perhaps in the mind of the reviewer, like a question, like, wow, so what else is unclear? Like, what aren't they explaining? I don't know, it just you just start thinking, like, once you read an addendum that seems unnecessary, you think, what's going on here? I don't really know how to explain the reaction very well. This is not very clear. But one of my colleagues at another school always says she feels like people are trying to cover something up if they give you an addendum that you don't need. I don't know that I'm quite that negative about it, but it definitely does create some sort of sense. So you got to think carefully, do I even need to do that? If you've decided, yes, this is something I really want to explain, then you have to think about the tone. You don't want to sound like you are blaming someone else for whatever the problem is, or that you sound like you are kvetching for the sake of kvetching. You want to sound like you are just matter of fact, down to earth, doing a service for the person reviewing your file to let them know the full context of the story about you. So I've talked about that sort of in an abstract way. I want to talk about some specifics now in the form of these questions that I've gotten, which I think should help put some meat on the bones of this general advice. All right, so the first question I want to address comes to us from Mike, who sent us an email. He starts by saying, I hope this email finds you well, and I just want to say that got addressed in some old episode of mine. Don't bother starting that way. Just go right into your question. But, okay. I am considering writing an addendum since my GPA will most likely be considerably lower than the median for next year's admissions cycle. My reasoning would be multiple family health problems over the course of 2 years or so that have prevented me from performing as well. In recent semesters, however, I've made no grades lower than an A-. Are there any pitfalls to writing an addendum like this? Also, is there anything I should consider adding or maybe trying to avoid adding in an addendum like this? All right, great question, Michael. Thank you. You've set us up very well for this conversation. So, okay, so let's assume, for the sake of argument here, that Michael has 2 years of grades that are, say, sub 3, and now he has a year of grades that are A- and A's, so like he has a GPA more recently of like 3.8. So overall, he maybe has a GPA of 3.1 or 3.2, which is, for law school admissions, at least at a school like Michigan, and different schools have different medians, so you should definitely be thinking about the school that you are applying to and what makes sense. But if you're applying to Michigan, where our median GPA is north of a 3.85, yeah, I mean, we definitely admit people with GPAs like that, but it's helpful to know why. And Michael identifies a very clear reason. The complicating factor of his clear reason is that he says it's multiple family health problems. Honestly, it's nice if you could just be like, this one thing happened. So his is going to be a little more complicated of a story. And what you don't want is to go on for like 2 pages explaining it. So for the sake of clarity and simplicity, I would try to trim this down. So I might not say, this family member had this and I had to do that, and then this family member had that from this period to that period. You don't want too much detail in there. I would sort of stick with what he wrote here. Like for the first 2 years of my college education, there were multiple family health problems that I had to deal with, either because it was very distracting and I was very worried about the health of, a parent or someone I was very close to, or perhaps I had duties that were put on me of caregiving, and that took 10 hours a week, or it required me to go home every other weekend or something like that. Like if it's an identifiable amount of time that you spend on it, that can be a useful thing to include. But don't go into great detail about like what the health problems were and who had them and during what period and so on and so forth. Kind of aggregate it together and put it that way, because this isn't like a background check, right? We don't need to know every single detail. What we want is the sense of like, well, what happened here that these grades look so much different than those grades. So try to keep it to a paragraph and keep it clear, but not super duper detailed. Okay, so that's our first question. Second, this is a good one. Next spring, I plan on taking a very light course load, dropping to part-time status. I have proactively freed up my schedule in this way so that I can dedicate a great deal of extra time and attention to LSAT prep. I imagine this will raise questions as it appears on my transcript. I think what he means is that the fewer credits will be clear from his transcript. During this time, I may only be enrolled in one course for transfer credit in my local community college in lieu of a full semester of on-campus work. I plan on applying KJD. Do you believe that an addendum will be necessary, and if so, how might you approach it? This is a complicated one because, to be very honest, I do not like seeing applications where people have taken, put everything to the side just for the sake of studying for the LSAT. The LSAT is a big deal, and you do need to study for it, and you do need to prepare for it, but it is one of those things that we're expecting that you will be doing in conjunction with the other things that you are also doing. Law as a profession is very demanding, law school is very demanding, and preparing to go to law school by taking the LSAT should be typically something that you can combine with other tasks. So to have one semester where you're taking one community college course and otherwise just studying for the LSAT doesn't look great. And so it will be noticeable, right? You're just taking one semester with one more class. But honestly, I think in this instance, you are better off leaving that unsaid, not saying, I'm just leaving it a mystery. If someone is curious, they can reach out and ask you why, and then you could explain it. But I think otherwise they'll think, maybe he's just I don't know, they'll tell themselves some story. And if you can do anything else, like volunteer or get a part-time job or something else, I would strongly encourage you to do that so there is something else happening, and they will probably attribute a whole bunch of your time to whatever that other activity is. And also, as a practical matter, it's not great sort of as an LSAT approach to just spend your whole time grinding it out with the LSAT. You need to be doing more than one thing, right? You need to give your brain a break from that particular task. So, yeah. So in this instance, I would try to leave that a mystery a little bit for the applicant. For your application. All right. Okay, this is an interesting one. This is someone who is asking about, this was from a while ago. This is Natalie, and Natalie forgot to include an addendum, or forgot to indicate that she had committed misconduct, which I said I wasn't going to cover, but I think this is helpful because she was asking, can I do this belatedly? What happens if I do this belatedly? And I would just say for any addendum that you want to send, first of all, for the misconduct, I'll just say, yeah, do it belatedly. You got to do it, so don't worry about it. Better to do it in time, but it's not a big deal, and just do it as soon as you think of it. But if there's something that you realize after you've submitted your application, maybe you get some feedback, maybe a school reaches out and says, we don't understand this aspect of your application, and then you realize, oh, that is unclear, I should have specified that, I want to specify it for my other schools, you can reach out after the fact and send them an email with an addendum attached, and just say, I feel like I realized belatedly that this would be something that might be helpful. So send it along whenever you realize it, and that will be fine. Next, we have someone named Z. So I love them. But this is, he asks, as a military applicant, I'm having trouble translating my jobs on my resume to make complete sense to someone non-military. I'm worried the way I'm doing it isn't conveying them well or sounds odd because of my phrasing. I was considering an addendum that's essentially a military jargon glossary. Would this be too much / odd, or just stuck with changing phrasing to make sense? I love this idea. I love the idea of trying to help us with this, but I do think it's actually putting a lot of work on the reader, because then they've got the addendum with the info, and then you got to scroll back up to you look at the resume and you're like, I don't get it. And then you go through the rest of the application, then you get to the addendum, and then you're like, oh, okay, so now I'll go back up to the resume, go back down here, okay, and you're going back and forth. That's a lot of effort and time that people may not engage in. If they look at your resume and they just don't understand it, that may be that, right? By the time they get to the addendum, it may be game over. They gave up on you. So I wouldn't take that approach. I would instead just try really hard to be as clear as possible. And I think the way to do this is to show it to some people who are civilians and say, do you understand what this means? And keep tweaking it and then maybe have a conversation with them. Let them ask you questions, and then you have a conversation back and forth about what are the various tasks that you did. And I would say also, don't get when one is in a particular field that has a lot of jargon, or is very technical in some way, it's easy to fall in love with the jargon and the technicalities, and it can be very hard to discipline yourself to be like, I need to just talk like a normal person who doesn't know all this. So I get the challenge, I really do, and I think it's great that you are aware of it, but I would say pull yourself back and try to make sure that the resume is as clear as possible. This is not a great use for an addendum. Thanks for asking. And then finally, we have a very interesting one from someone named Shreya, who is an international student, and she asks a really interesting question about I am writing an addendum explaining my mixed family status plus extensive time studying, working, and living in the U.S. as a result of some naturalized family. My partner is also American. In a TikTok, you mentioned that law schools might be apprehensive because of visa and job opportunities for international applicants. I would like to explain that I do have 2 ways to apply for a green card, through my family and through my partner. However, I am interested in international law jobs upon graduation. What is the best way to explain that while I have ways to stay in the U.S. upon graduation, my academic interests might not require that immediately, and when it does, I will be able to come back? So this is a very interesting question, because there's just a lot of moving parts to it. So my approach to this would be, in your addendum, explain that you I mean, I can't tell from what you've written, but it sounds like you intend to apply for a green card and that you are optimistic that you will get it. So I think I would say just that. I intend to apply for a green card, and because of various family ties, I am optimistic that I will, in fact, receive a green card. And if you know the timeline, that's a great thing to add. In terms of, though, that you don't think you need it because you're going to look for international jobs, I would not put that in the addendum. I would instead be talking about that elsewhere in your application, because it's, you know, the classic sort of, why do you want to go to law school? What do you want to do with this law degree? You want to work in international development, and, you know, you've got a background in it. So, which I may not have read, but she does mention that she has a background in it. So that's like, it's perfect. So either in an optional essay or as part of your personal statement, I would focus there. So then they understand these are your goals you want to leave, and also separately, you think you will soon be a permanent resident. In that way, you're getting both things done. But I wouldn't, you know, to explain it all in one essay or one addendum, that's going to be an actual essay. That's a full page. And again, you want to keep this no more than a half a page, if that. All right. Well, I hope those examples were useful, and I hope this is helpful for those of you who are thinking about all the ways your application materials fit together. Now, for grammar, very thematic, a single piece of information is called an addendum, UM. If you're doing more than one, it is not addendums, it is addenda. The plural of addendum is addenda. And a lot of people say addendums, and I don't think it sounds appalling to say addendums, but I think it sounds very nice to say addenda, and you'll sound very in the know. So that's the plural. All right, thanks as always for watching and listening. Thank you to Dustin for always finding these rooms for us. Really appreciate it, and setting me up. I come in and the chair's all set where I need to sit. It's perfect. And wherever you go, go blue.